Welcome to the Open Bedroom Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Kalo. Welcome to conversations about open relationships, online dating, conscious uncoupling, and creating the relationship that truly aligns for you. If you enjoy this podcast, I hope that you do a couple things for us. Would you subscribe? Would you write a review? Maybe share us with your friends. And if you extra like us, there's a link in the show notes here for my Patreon that does help pay for the creation of this podcast. And lastly, follow us on the Open Bedroom. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to, I feel like kind of a special edition to the Open Bedroom Podcast. I just turned 40 and I feel like I've learned some really incredible things within the last decade, and I wanted to dedicate an episode just to keeping a record of this. And for those of you that are in your 30s or 40s or even 50s or 60s, and you just don't feel like life is turning out the way that you wanted it to be, you're like, I thought that there was more, or I really felt like I should be somewhere else. I'd love if you would let me share my story with you. So let me start by saying I've lived my life in decades at a time. And I don't know if this is the case for men, but I hear a lot from women that they're very similar, that as we cross into a new decade, there's something biologically that stops and goes like, hey girl, do you want to do this again for the next 10 years of your life? So my 20s were spent figuring out, I think really figuring out who I was as a person. It was like I found the man that I wanted to live with. I found my first husband. I started to have children. I started working at the world's largest retailer. I started getting promoted at work. I finished my undergrad. I got my MBA, and I tried to be the girl that I thought my parents wanted me to be. I tried to become the woman that I envisioned in high school as being successful and prosperous and a happy woman and a happy mom. And I got to the end of my 20s and I was kind of just like, this is it? Is this really it for the rest of my life? I had chosen a man very much. Well, that's not true. I was going to say I'd chosen a man very much like my dad, but truthfully, I chose a man the opposite of my dad. I needed a father figure in my life. While my dad was present throughout my life, quick story there, my parents divorced when I was 6. My family was from New Orleans, and we ended up moving to Arkansas when I was around 5 or 6. My parents decided to open up a restaurant. My dad fell in love with a waitress. Our family quickly crumbled and everything was rebuilt. They got married. They had 2 kids. My mom was suddenly a single mother in a state where none of her family was, feeling very abandoned and hurtful. And there you go. Bam, there's my childhood. So I saw my dad like kind of every other weekend and throughout the summer. And when he was there, he wasn't really present. I remember him physically being there, but not like he wasn't spending time with me. And the times that I do remember him being there, either I was working at our restaurant with him, so I was an employee, or I remember several times throughout my childhood of him being irritated or angry with me because I was like, you know, something he could blame for something not happening well in his life. Like I remember at one point my stepmother leaving because she was really overwhelmed with like how dramatic my mother was being. And so she left my dad and like drove to Missouri. And I remember my dad looking at me and my brother and going, well, there you go. Y'all did it. Like it was my fault. So my dad was there, but not present. And I remember on my 16th birthday, he took me out to eat, which was, I think, the only time him and I ever ate alone throughout my whole childhood. And I remember looking at him and saying, like, this is a really nice gesture, but you don't know me at all. Like, what's my favorite color? What's my favorite band? What do I like to do? Do you know any of this? And he just looked at me and he was like, no, I don't know this. So that'll give you an idea of like this void that I had in my life of a father figure that was like actually present. And so I went into college, and the first man that I met, I fell in love with, moved in with, got married, ended up having his children. And he was the opposite of my dad, very much all up in my life, very much overly controlling, where my dad was like, you do whatever you want. He was like, this is what we're going to do. And this is how you're going to behave. And don't spend any money. And if you buy a coffee, don't do it. But if you do, I'm going to ask you about it. Like, it was a whole thing. And so by the end of my 20s, I looked at my husband, my two beautiful children. We had just bought a brand new house. We probably made $200,000-$300,000 together. And I was like, I feel like a princess in a prison. Like, I feel like a princess in a castle, and I'm in the dungeon, and I hate what I've created, and I don't want this anymore. And it was so clear to me. So I left my first marriage in my 20s and walked into my 30s. And this is where the magic happened. And let me stop and say, if I would not have had the guts to leave in my 20s, there's sure as fuck no way I would have been able to create all the magic that I have created in my 30s. That makes me so excited for my 40s and this next phase of my life. So here's all the fun stuff that I've been able to create in my 30s. Number one, I started my business. So I told you I was working for the world's largest retailer, Walmart. And I all of a sudden had some guts at the end of my 20s. I had just had my second child. And I started looking up, and I was like, there has to be more than these cubicle walls. There has to be more than just Walmart. What else is out there? And I got on LinkedIn and I got curious, and I updated my bio. And again, this was 10 years ago. So LinkedIn at that point was still kind of like new and innovative. And like, it was a big deal for me to be on LinkedIn. And oh no, my employer might see that I'm out there looking for something else. And I got really lucky, and I started working for a granola company that sold into Walmart. And I became their Walmart and Sam's Club rep. So I became a broker. And then shortly after, I was there about a year and a half. And then I started my own brokerage firm, and I realized I don't have to just sell bars and granola. I can sell anything. And I was very entrepreneurial at that point. I was selling skinny wraps. I was like in this MLM company, and I was working my ass off. Like, I was working during the day at the granola company. And then at night and in the evening, I was monitoring my teams and managing my teams and trying to grow my teams and going and doing skinny wrap parties till midnight. And I was making enough to pay my mortgage. It was a big deal. Like, I was making some pretty good money in this skinny wrap company. Not as much as being a broker, but it was growing. And I realized one day the dream that they were selling me in the MLM company was never going to come true. Like, the ask of how many recruits you had to get and how many skinny wraps you had to sell was astronomical. But I realized my work ethic is so good, and I'm actually really freaking scrappy, and I'm a great manager. Why don't I just start my own company? So I did. So 10 years ago, I started Spurt Sales and Marketing. That's what my company is called. We help brands sell into Walmart, Amazon. We do Shopify. We do social media management. And I bet you had no idea that the person behind an open relationship podcast owns a sales and marketing company, but I do. I'm a very regular person. I'm a mom. I'm a partner to my partner, Scott. And I have an open relationship. So we'll talk about that later. This was the beginning of my 30s. So I started my company. In the last decade, I've made over $3 million. I think I'm not here to brag about this. B, 0.5%, I think that's the stat, 0.5% of all women will ever make $1 million. And it's really, really fucking important for me to be the one to say, I've done it. And if I can do it, you can do it. And so there's a whole business side of me that I'm not going to talk about on this podcast, but You can follow us on social media underneath Growth Spurt Sales and Marketing. This is the first time I've ever actually talked about my company, but I'll put the link below if you're curious. And I do a lot of business coaching through that company. If you're curious on how to, make $1 million+ in your business, how to be a woman that's a multimillionaire, I'll talk about that over there. But for here, we'll just leave that alone. I have employed over 20 people, most of them mothers. My goal with this company was, how can I just take one more of me, me that was the mom in the cubicle? How can I get one more mom out of the cubicle and into her home? One more mom that has the freedom and the flexibility to take their kiddo, that can go have lunch with their kids, or that can go to their kids' field trips, or that can, for me, it was really important as my kids had been young to show up in car line. I drop my kids off at school every day that I have them, and I have joint custody, and I pick them up from school on the days that I have them. I don't have a nanny do it. I don't make them ride the bus. Like, I want to be there. I want to be the first one to go, how's your day? Did anything crazy happen? How's the girlfriend? Like, I want to know all about it. And so it was important to me to create that kind of a life. Speaking of, my next point is, I've created a life that I'm excited to wake up to every day. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work from Hawaii, from the beach, work from Ireland, work from Italy. I mean, I've been all over the world, and my business has paid for a lot of these trips. And I've done some work while I'm there sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And I'm so freaking grateful to not have to wake up to an alarm clock ever. For several years, I scheduled massages on Monday mornings while everyone else was like hectically trying to get to work, just to kind of bask in what I'd created. I'm like, y'all enjoyed that commute. I'm going to be right here on the massage table. And as I started creating supportive ways to support my own self, I realized as an entrepreneur, when I lay on a massage table and someone works on me, I can unplug from everything that I have to do. And I get the best business ideas from just being present on the massage table. I launched a podcast that way. I've launched programs in my business. I've remembered I needed to reach out to a referral partner, who then brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars into my business. Take the time and the space to nurture yourself. And as a business owner, have some space in your life to allow those multi-million-dollar ideas to flow through. I also started podcasting in my 30s. I've had a podcast now, I want to say about 5 years. I started with just a brick and mortar retail podcast. That one now has transitioned over to I have like a second Spotify host podcasting platform, and it's called Bricks and Clicks Podcast. I'll also link to that in case you're curious, just, because again, I've never linked to any of this stuff on this podcast, but just so if you're curious. So I started with Bricks and Clicks. And then I moved into this because this was much more exciting. And I'll talk more about how I got to here into open relationships. But I started podcasting and I've never looked back. I've podcasted and had an episode every single week for 5 years. This is the biggest thing I've learned on the business side in the last decade. I learned the importance of consistency. So I just said I've had a podcast for 5 years, and every week I've dropped at least one episode. Now I've gotten to the point, because I'm so good at consistently creating content, and now how I batch that content, and now I'm using AI technology all over my business to create some of these short videos that you guys see, to create the copy that you see within the podcast episodes. I'm using it for social media posts. Like, I just keep evolving. And because I've created these processes, now I do a Patreon video that's exclusive to Patreon every single week. I do a open bedroom podcast every single week. And then we are occasionally doing our retail podcasts and really using that more for content for our social media more than anything. There's not a lot of people that actually want to listen to a retail podcast, I have found. And so instead of me trying to get it, better searched in podcast world, I'm like, how can we just do a video and then pull and extrapolate a bunch of different short reels that we can use out of it onto our social media? So that's my current strategy on that one. And then I'm launching a third podcast in January called No Longer Plastic, that to me kind of straddles both of my podcast worlds, where I've got retail and entrepreneurs, and then I've got sexy relationship and sex stuff. And so No Longer Plastic is something that kind of brings the two worlds together. And I've been interviewing entrepreneurs that are completely showing up aligned in their life. And they're saying, well, yeah, I'm in an open relationship, and they're public about it in the world. And I own a heating and air company. And I also love to ski. And on the weekends, I go camping. Like, they're fully integrated. And so my purpose with that particular podcast is to show the world that when we show up completely authentically ourselves, our perfect customers magnetize to us, we actually increase our sales. And that's what I've done to create a $3+ million company. Okay. Other things I've done in my 40s outside of just business. I think I'm like most proud of my business. And so that's why I started with that. But the second thing that was really impactful for me is I found and married my second husband, Derek. Derek was exactly what I needed. It's funny, as the pendulum swings throughout our life. And I started with a dad that was present, but not very active. And he was calm. And then I went to my first husband, who was verbally abusive and aggressive and all up in my business and telling me I can't buy coffee with my own money. And then I went to back to the other side of the pendulum. So Derek's personality was very calm, kind of unplugged and detached, but felt safe to my nervous system. It was like I needed something comfortable from like what I had experienced as a child. And what came with Derek was an incredible support system from his family. His parents and his aunts and uncles loved my babies because they were little. When I first met Derek, my youngest was still in diapers. So I think Ian was 4 and Kai was around a year and a half. His parents and his family just fully embraced my boys. They embraced me. They gave us amazing Christmases, amazing birthday presents. They showed up all the time and drove 3 hours north to come to our house and just really be a part of my life and my kids' lives. And I'll say, out of that marriage, that's what I miss the most. I miss his family support system. His family was freaking amazing to me. And what I got out of my second marriage was safety. Like, Derek never yelled at me. He was a very, like I said, just stable and supportive husband. And I don't mean financially supportive. I just mean energetically supportive. It's funny because like my current partner, Scott, and some of my friends were like, how did you feel all these things from him? He kind of just hung out in his office and watched game shows. And he did do a lot of that, but he also like would vacation with me. And the interesting, I think, thing about my second marriage is like, I was in control. I was the boss. I was the breadwinner. I was in control. I needed that control. And I needed to have a husband who would allow me to have that and then be balanced. Like, I wasn't crazy about it. I was the one in charge of everything. And he supported me energetically and would show up, and it was great. So I wrote down some things that he gave me: safety, security, a supportive family, love, a chance to find myself. You know, my first husband, where he was like, you can't even go buy a coffee. Derek was like, I don't care what you do. It's your money. Like, go buy the program, go fly to Charleston, go see Rachel Hollis. Like, I don't care what you do. And I was in charge of our finances, and he never even knew how much I made. So I just did whatever the hell I wanted. I learned to invest in myself, and I learned to expand and spread my wings to the point where I outgrew him. And I realized towards the end of our 8+ year marriage that I'd never tried anything sexually, that I was, 20 years into 2 different marriages, and was still having sex in the missionary position for 20 minutes at a time. Like I wanted expansiveness in my sex life and I wanted to experience that with him. And he was resistant and didn't want that. And so at the end of the day, it ended up being the detriment of our marriage, which is fine. I hate to say that. I shouldn't say that. I should rewind. At the end, I ended up outgrowing him and he decided to move on. He decided to find someone that was, perfectly happy being vanilla, which is great and much more aligned with him. And I had the opportunity to move on to partner number 30, Scott, who you guys hear me talk about all the time. Okay. So a couple other things. I have 5 total things and we're at number 2. So number 3 for me that I have created for myself in my 30s is amazing kids. My sons are good looking, sweet, love their mama, great to their dad, children. And they're so unique and they think for themselves and they have very distinct personalities that we've allowed to unfold. So I was never the mom that was like, this is how you have to dress and I'm going to buy all your clothes for you. And when we do family pictures, you will fucking match. I was just never that mom. I was the mom that was like, I buy play clothes for my kids. Like I went to Walmart and bought Granimals, and I don't remember what Target's line is, but like I bought Target branded clothes and Walmart branded clothes. And I've always let my kids, like my youngest wears hand-me-downs from my oldest. It's a little different now that they're teenagers, but when they were younger, like I let them be them and I let them pick out. Kai was really into dinosaur shirts. So every shirt had to have a dinosaur. When he was really little, it was Batman. So he'd wear his Batman pajamas everywhere. He had all these shirts with the detachable capes so he could be Batman everywhere. I loved it. I loved letting my kids just be them. And as they've gotten older, that's changed into, okay, I want to eat the way I want to eat. Like, okay, I want to try ramen. Okay, I want to try fancy grilled cheese sandwiches. Like, and now I want to learn how to cook. And so I just fully let them become who they are. And it's enabled my 12 and now 15-year-old to be such unique humans in their teens. And I can't even imagine what they're going to be like in their 20s. And I'm proud of that for me as their mother. And I'm proud that their dad has also allowed them to become who they want to be. We've done really good with them. Number 4 are I've developed best friends that I can go really freaking deep with. And I didn't have this until just a few years ago. I allowed myself, how I was telling you, I invested in my business a lot and I invested in my own growth a lot. And I allowed myself to join a women's group in Hawaii. It was my birthday present to myself. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. And it changed my life. At that point, I wasn't friends with women. I thought all women were catty. I was only really friends with men and not very deep because I was married. I didn't want to be weird. So I started to make friends through this priestess program that I was in. And then that expanded to my friend Tony, who I met through working out and buying healthy meals. And he was there and he told me he was a trainer and I hired him. Like one thing just led to the next thing that led to the next thing. And then my friends became friends with each other. And that continues today to now where on Mondays we go do yoga and then we walk down the trail and we go eat dinner and we have margaritas. And my friends that show up have all become good friends because I brought them all together. And it's so freaking cool to watch them and to be able to talk about anything from sex and relationships to kids that are misbehaving and how can we help, to one woman had a pretty massive car wreck. And so we're checking in with her about that. And we're talking about what's not happy in our lives and how we can make it happier and what we can do to change. These are like amazing friendships that if I hadn't have spent the time and the energy and allowed myself the space to go be friends, because like, let's face it, being a friend as an adult is like dating. You have to like ask them to coffee and then you have to ask them about their day and then you have to spend time with them and then you got to invite them over and you got to cook for them. It's like dating. It takes a lot of energy to be friends with people. And I'm grateful that I have grown as a person, that I've learned what it's like to make friends as an adult, and that I've invested the time and the money and the energy to be friends. And now I have a great friend pool. The last thing that I wanted to say about what my 30s have looked like is, and this feels like a big one, I have allowed myself to morph and change, and I've allowed my partners to flow in and out of my life. So society tells us that we are to have the white picket fence, the one husband forever, the one partner forever, 2.5 kids and a dog. And for some reason, we also think our careers are supposed to last forever. None of these things are true. If you look at statistics and you look at reality, 50% of all marriages are not going to stay together. You may not have 2.5 kids. You might have one, or you might have 5. You may not have a dog. You might have 3 cats, and you might have 15 or 50 careers before you're done. And that's okay. And when I gave myself permission to experience people and jobs flow in and out of my life like water, and I embraced the fluidity of that, it became so much easier to let it go. And then it became so much easier to allow the new in. And I feel like as I step into my 40s, I've allowed my first husband to flow in, to be what I needed him to be for a decade, and flow back out. I allowed my second husband to flow in. I met him on Match.com. He was exactly what I needed for 8 to 9 years, flowed out. I met Scott when Derek and I opened our relationship. He was the second man I dated on Tinder. I allowed Scott to flow in. When it became important and Scott said, Jen, I can't keep dating you because I'm feeling things and you're still dating all these men, I'm going to have to peace out here. And I said, no, I feel something for you. This is deeper than I thought it would be, and I want to explore this. And I kept him in, and here he is. He hadn't flown out yet. Thank goodness. I'm not ready for him to flow out. Do I believe that we can be partnered for life? Absolutely. I have not seen it myself personally, or with any of my family members. Everyone is divorced. But I do believe it's possible. I believe it takes a fuck ton of work. It is constant work to be in partnership with someone else, to grow beside someone else, and to support their growth. It is a fuck ton of work to communicate deeply and consciously. And I'll tell you, being in an open relationship with Scott just adds even more layers of complexity. However, it also brings so many layers and options and availability for growth. So I think when we're in monogamous relationships, it feels safe. So we start to repeat things. We repeat the way we have sex. We repeat the way we have dinner. We repeat the way we wash clothes. We repeat the way that we talk to each other. And we're like, there's this interesting feeling of safety and security in monogamous relationships that really truly isn't real. It's just assumed. And so we embrace it. And so we rinse, wash, repeat, rinse, wash, repeat. And then throughout the years, we realize we've grown so far apart that there's really no way to get back together at the end. And so that's what's happened with me over the last 2 decades with each husband. It's different with Scott. And we're 2 years in. We just also celebrated our 2-year anniversary. So that feels really big. And when something hard comes up, we talk through it. And it hurts, and it's hard, and it's uncomfortable. And it makes my stomach uncomfortable and hard and hurt. And it makes me want to throw up sometimes. Him too. We're looking at our attachment styles and our patterns, and he wants to flee. His attachment style is to flee. My attachment style is kind of to dig in and do the work and just keep asking the hard questions. I also have an attachment style that gets a little bit anxious when he wants to flee, because I don't want him to flee, like I don't want people to leave me. And I work really hard to be a good partner to my people, to my partners, a good friend to my friends, a good employer to my team, and our clients. And I feel like I come to the table willing to do the work. And so my hope is that partner number 3, Scott and I last at least a decade. That would be amazing to me. And it's cute because we talk about the rest of our life. We talk about growing old together. Scott's really encouraged me to just be me and to not feel or look fake. So I've stopped doing Botox. As you guys can see here in the video, I have stopped coloring my hair. I have a lot of gray. And it's interesting as I sit here at 40 now, I've never felt more me in my life. I've never felt less that I have to pretend to be something else or that I have to show up in a certain way to have a client want to hire me or a person want to be my friend. It's just like I've realized all I have to do is be me and it all just falls into place. All I have to do is be me and people say, yeah, we want to work with you. All I have to do is be me and I have clients that want me to coach them. And so I want to encourage you now, since we're at the end of this podcast and you've listened to me talk about myself the entire time. A, thank you for still being here. And B, I want to encourage you to just be you. You don't have to keep doing things for other people, looking a certain way for other people, showing up in the world for other people. What would happen if you just showed up as you? What would your next decade look like? As I think about my next decade in my 40s, I only have a few more years with my oldest kiddo before he goes to school. He's talked about living in Japan, so he may not even be on this continent in a few years. I have several more years with my youngest, and my intention is to be incredibly present with both of them while they're still here. And I can feel the energy of them already starting to step out a little bit. Like if you think about ourselves, our human bodies, if we were super tall and there's a fence and you kind of start to step over that fence into the next phase of your life, I picture my oldest being that way. He's taking his foot off the ground. He's learning new things. He's preparing for the next phase in his life. And man, as a mom, that feels so weird to realize that my kids aren't going to be here forever. And so I think about that. What will that be for me as an empty nester? How will that feel? How do I want my relationship with my partner to be when my kids leave? I've seen so many couples that get divorced or break up or live unhappily the rest of their lives once their kids are gone because they don't know how to communicate to each other. There's no passion in their relationships. They don't have date nights or have sex anymore. There's no connection. And I don't want that for myself. I can't imagine that being me because that hasn't been me now for 20 years as an adult. Like I've always been looking for connection and love and sex and vitality and feeling alive. And I imagine even more of that being so in my 40s, continuing to figure out who I am and continuing to allow myself to grow and change and morph. So I wish that for you. I hope for you that you continue to allow yourself to grow and change and morph, to become the person that your soul so desires for you to be. And if you find yourself kind of clenching down, bearing down, and saying to yourself, well, I can't allow myself to be that person. I can't allow myself to really show up how I am. I'd like to encourage you to just try it. Try it out. Tease it out a little bit and see what happens. I'm pretty sure your life won't actually be as drastically changed as you think it might be. And then let me know how it goes. I am always here if you need some coaching, if you need someone to listen to you. I do a lot of this as a coach. Lately, I've been doing a lot of helping couples open their relationship. I've also been doing a lot of helping couples close and end their relationship, or just help it transition into the next phase of life that they're in. But I'm absolutely available as well for one-on-one coaching that's just life stuff. Here's where I'm at. Help me change my perspective. Here's the job I've had for 20 years. Help me create a new revenue source. I'm actually really good at business. And as I mentioned, I will include my links below in case you're curious what the sales and marketing side of my life is like. I'll let you go scope it out, and you can kind of like be that creeper on the internet that sees what I've created. But again, thank you for being here this long with me on the podcast. Thank you for being here with me on this journey. And thanks for listening to, Jen Turns 40. Thanks, guys. See you on the next podcast. Hey there. I love to tell you about my Patreon account. So as many of you know, as things become more and more censored, it's harder for content creators like us to stay live on these amazing platforms like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. So what I've done is our spicier content now lives over on Patreon. We currently have some really fun episodes up, like how to give amazing blowjobs. I also just recorded and uploaded my night in a dungeon with a dominatrix. What can you expect? Weekly episodes and weekly content, some of it being sex ed, some of it being story and erotic telling, like I just did with my night in the dungeon, some of it being more podcasting where we have a guest on. So for an entry price right now of $5 per month, you can hop into my Patreon account and check it out. Check the show notes below for more information. Hope to see you there. Bye.